number you have reached, 911, has been changed to a non-published number.
What's up, guys? This is Jay Scott.
This is Trent Lackey. Welcome to World of the Unexplained.
Tonight we've got Edward Wahler with us. He's the author, or one of the co-authors, I guess I should say, of the book U.S. of A. versus U.S., The Loss of Legal Memory in the American State, of the American State. Edward is the son of a police officer. He attended the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, and he's also got a B.S. degree in electrical engineering. He founded his own company in 1984, which he ran as president and CEO until 1998. And the last 8 years, he has spent his time researching law history, alternative energy, and alternative approaches to maintaining one's health. And basically, this book is a culmination of some of the things that he's learned, as well as that of his co-authors. And I think he's got some pretty interesting things to say, and something that probably a lot of you haven't heard before. So I guess we'll just go ahead and bring Ed on.
No.
Go ahead. Ed, are you with us?
I'm here. Hi, guys.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So tell, I don't know how the best way to start this is. I don't want to get too involved in a lot of the complexities in a book of this nature. It's very intense. I'll say that just to preface it. It's a very intense book, and it definitely.
Get started on how
can you give we can go back
background
to the founding fathers and start there and go forward up to the New Deal if you want to start there, or just kind of give us a brief history of where we're at.
Well, the derivation of the book was an attempt to try and begin to explain to people what has happened. I mean, like we say in the foreword, you can't spit without hitting somebody that says, this country's gone to heck in a handbasket, or well, I remember when, or whatever the cliche is. And what most people don't realize is there have been substantial structural legal changes that have taken what they are taught they believe they lived in, which is a representative republic controlled by a constitution, into a legislative democracy which is militarily enforced through contract.
Okay.
And until people, what we run into is a problem with cognitive dissonance, which is a psychological term to describe when somebody is given information which is counter to what their established beliefs are. So the hardest part in dealing with this problem is human nature. People can't believe they've been lied to their whole lives. They can't believe that all the values and beliefs and foundational understandings of their beloved country aren't true. And, when they see things like the Kelo case in New London, where property was taken from a woman to give to a private corporation simply to raise more taxes, or, certain Supreme Court cases dealing with parental rights and what the schools can and can't tell their kids, and they say there's something wrong. Of course, the question is what and how did it become this way? So what we try to establish in the book are an introduction to what we call the conditions precedent. What happened and how it happened and how they quasi-legally got people to leave the warm, fuzzy feeling of the Constitution and their God-given unalienable rights to enter this thing called a legislative democracy, which has been built to give the people in power greater control over our lives, take our rights away from us, and make us, chattel property of the state. And that's, we're not trying to be the, haranguing patriots of doom and gloom. We take you in the book through case law, specifically a lot of case law back in the 1934-35 range, when the big shift, up through about 37-38, when the big shift in constitutional law occurred. The Supreme Court actually redefined and changed their position on numerous issues. One, of course, is interstate commerce. One is what is a controversy before the law, and expanded the power of the federal government to reach down into the states to regulate. There was a time when no American living in the several states had any interaction with the federal government.
I agree with that. No. I mean, we have to argue though that one of the good points about the changing of the interstate commerce and some of those areas. Well, you think back to some of the other case law out there, like the Heart of Atlanta Hotel and some of the civil rights work that was done there that allowed blacks to travel freely in the South. I mean, because before that, states would say, you can't stay in this hotel because you're black. What do you think about that? I mean, as far as controlling interstate commerce through that kind of legislative act?
Well, see, that was the big hoax. Okay, you have to understand what civil rights are.
Okay.
Those are rights granted civilly by a government. They're not a recognition of God-given unalienable rights. We never actually brought, the black slave into the Constitution and recognized him as a whole person.
That's true historically. Yeah.
Okay, what we did actually in the long run was make everyone, black or white or any other color, a slave to the government.
Ah, okay.
Okay, and a lot of people call the 14th Amendment the Red Amendment and a bunch of things. There's a lot of misunderstanding there in that, the 14th Amendment really had much more power over the states than it did with people.
Yeah.
But it's been used for a lot of bad purposes as well, whether it be Roe v. Wade and the sodomy case in Texas and
Hardwick
school.
Yeah.
But, in terms of, dealing with the slavery issue, the 14th Amendment was simply supposed to give a form of citizenship known as United States citizenship to blacks because the states didn't necessarily recognize them. Well, and that really isn't true because even North Carolina, prior to the Civil War, allowed free blacks to vote. Of course, people believe that the Civil War was over slavery, which is so far from the truth that it's not even.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Absolutely.
Too. So what they had to do from Reconstruction, which started the federal occupation of the states, the federalization of the states, and the end of the Ninth and Tenth Amendments, up to the bankruptcy in 1933, when the government became insolvent, basically in the Bankers Trust case and a number of the other cases that we talk about in the book, the Supreme Court said, hey, the survival of the government is paramount. They can throw away all their obligations, and suddenly we have all these new powers to deal with an emergency. Well, as the great constitutional scholar Edwin Vieira talks about, the word emergency doesn't even appear in the Constitution. There are no emergency powers granted to the government in the Constitution, and yet we live under a constant state of emergency. Senate document 93-549 from 1973 talks about a continual state of emergency that, the majority of the people living alive at the time of 1973, for at least the past 40 years, obviously since 1933, have lived in a continual state of emergency where small or large parts of the Constitution had been set aside. Well, once again, why has that happened? Why have the people allowed that to happen? And, of course, mostly it's through ignorance. People today, if you ask them the question, what is the function of government? And the really short answer is to protect people's rights. That is the only legitimate function of government. We've actually found some case law that says taxes. Taxes are only taxes when they're used 100% to fund the functions of government. When they're used to pass on to the people for Social Security, Medicare, any other purpose besides the preservation of government, they're not taxes anymore. Matter of fact, they're not even lawful.
So no, I know in an earlier conversation we had you had basically said that you can opt out of certain things like Social Security. I know in the conversation we had earlier you had even stated that hey, you don't even need to have a driver's license to drive a car.
You don't need one. Your life is going to be a little hassled if you go down that road.
Uh-huh.
I've got a case in Morganton that I'm prosecuting, and I plan on, with some of my other supporters, going up to the state legislature and really filing a complaint because the courts and the executive branch of government are misapplying the Motor Vehicle Code. The Motor Vehicle Code, as written, is constitutional and legal because it doesn't require anyone not engaged in a commercial activity to have a driver's license or anything else, or even register their car.
Huh.
But, of course, what the courts do is presuppose that everyone is engaged in a commercial activity, even when there's no evidence to support that conclusion.
So you've actually...
Whether you want to deal with the income tax code, that's a hot button for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
As written, it is 100% constitutional. I'm not one of those people to say, income taxes are unconstitutional. The issue is the tax code as written only applies to government personnel. Now, what people don't understand is when you get a Social Security number under 5 U.S.C. 552A, A13 of the United States codes, you become federal personnel. That site that I just gave you defines federal personnel as anyone being entitled to receive a deferred compensation or deferred retirement program under any program of the United States.
So what you're saying is if I decide, hey, I don't want to participate in the Social Security, in Social Security later on, I don't want to receive any benefits from it, I can realistically opt out of receiving Social Security and I won't have to pay my taxes?
I haven't paid Social Security in, 5-6 years.
Wow.
Don't intend on it. Never will again. It's a bad deal. I don't need somebody else to take care of my future. If you run the numbers as an investment, Social Security is the worst investment you could ever imagine in terms of return on investment.
Yeah, my producer's shaking his head yes right now.
If you look at the Social Security Code in Title 42, you'll find that it's only authorized, in other words, the Secretary of the Social Security Administration can only administer Social Security in the federal zone, and that's areas that are under the direct control of Congress, such as D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, Samoa, the U.S. Virgin Islands, et cetera, et cetera. There is no authority under the law, as written today, for the Social Security Administrator to administer Social Security in the several states of the Union.
Okay.
So in essence, what you have to do to get into it is swear under pains and penalties of perjury that you are a resident of the District of Columbia, which is probably a lie. So everyone out there engaged in Social Security has committed perjury and a fraud to become part of the system. For those people who say, well, how do you work without a Social Security number? It can be done, and Social Security will admit there is no law on the books whatsoever requiring anyone to get a Social Security number.
It's like
never has been, never will be.
Well, it's like, everything else, though. You see, if you go to a doctor, even a doctor's office, they harass you and hound you for your Social Security number. You can't fill out just a job application, any kind of health paperwork. Everybody wants your Social Security number.
Yeah, you are.
Well, we made this problem, and the only people that can fix it is us. We all just took it on blind faith that our wonderful, corrupt, evil government would tell us the truth, and they lied to us about the necessity of having one. I mean, when you were a young child and or a young man, whatever, went out to get your first job, you were probably told, well, you can't work here without a Social Security number. Mm-hmm. Well, that's absolutely a lie. Okay? There's provisions in the tax code for what are called non-resident aliens. I am a non-resident alien with respect to the tax code. Why? Because I don't live in the District of Columbia where the tax code applies.
I see.
So
I see. Okay.
I can go out, I can get a job, and all I have to do is provide the proper affidavit and form to my employer that I am a non-resident alien, and if you don't think this is done every day, the biggest user of the W-8 and other forms that the IRS creates to prove proper status, all the colleges in the country do this all the time because foreign students come into the country, and while they're there for 4 years at the college, they want to work.
Yeah.
And the college says, well, we don't have to deduct, Social Security, Medicare, income taxes from you because you're a non-resident alien. You're going to leave sometime, and there's no sense doing this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But we all think we're U.S. citizens. People don't even know what the definition of a U.S. citizen is. I am not a U.S. citizen, don't want to be a U.S. citizen. have never been a U.S. citizen. I'm a U.S. national. But under Title VIII, the Immigration Naturalization Codes of the United States, they clearly define what a U.S. citizen is, what a U.S. national is, what the difference is.
And what exactly is that difference?
Well, a U.S. national is someone who has a political affiliation with the laws of Congress and the general government. But I am not subject to the legislative authority of Congress because I'm a state citizen. I am domiciled within one of the several states of the Union. Okay, a U.S. citizen is completely subject, and that's why in the 14th Amendment it says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. You are subject to the legislative jurisdiction of the United States, and therefore Congress can, under Article 1, Section 8, paragraphs 17 and 18, legislate for U.S. citizens, including making them pay an income tax.
Yeah.
So it's one of the most obvious examples of what you don't know can absolutely hurt you.
So you're basically saying that by agreeing to these things like Social Security, like income tax, like all these different social programs, that we're basically using the right of the freedom to contract that's in our Constitution to contract with the federal government.
Absolutely, and what the courts have held is that where the government subsidizes something or you derive a benefit from the government has an absolute right to regulate it. In our book, we cite all 7 of the Ashwander rules, which were written by Justice Brandeis in the 30s, and they deal with what the Supreme Court was going to do with the new reality that existed with the New Deal. The New Deal was literally a new interpretation of our relationship with the government and its authority over us. And one sentence describes how we get into this mess. And then rule number 6 says, the court will not pass upon the constitutionality of a statute at the instance of one who has availed himself of its benefits. And there's case law that says where the government subsidizes something, it has the power to control, regulate, and tax.
Yeah.
So we have all volunteered into all these wonderful arrangements, giving up, our constitutional rights, our God-given rights, and we have a new deal, a new relationship with the government, which is no longer one of us being the sovereigns, them being the servant government, but is actually one of we are enfranchised, we are incorporated, and we are business entities that the government can control, regulate, and tax.
Yep. Go ahead, Charlie.
There was some kind of lingering question about states, state legislature versus federal, and I know nothing about this. I'll be honest.
Okay.
But with that in mind, would that be to say that state taxes are simply an extension of federal taxes? That the federals are just kind of like basically subcontracting state governments to perform their wishes? I mean, I don't know. Here's going to be...
Like
I said, I don't know anything about it, so...
Here's the big shocker. There's not a single state in operation today. The states have all been collapsed. What exists today are... In fact, we have letters from the Secretary of State of North Carolina admitting that state of North Carolina is a sub-jurisdiction of the United States. Okay, the states do not exist. All their constitutions have been put into the archives, in the state archives. There are no what we call de jure lawful constitutional states in operation today. And therefore, the income tax, and I'll talk about North Carolina because that's probably where the majority of your listeners are from, the way North Carolina does it is they bring all of Title 26, which is, of course, the Internal Revenue Code, into the state statutes, and they simply refer to it as the code.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and if you notice, right on the North Carolina Department of Revenue website, it says that if you have no adjusted gross income on your federal tax return, then you don't need to file a state return. Okay, the state system is totally derivative or based upon the federal system, and if you don't have a federal liability, you don't have a state liability.
No, I mean, a lot of the states, the states incorporate a lot of the things that the federal government passes as laws. For example, I think the rules of evidence in North Carolina and legally are virtually in a lot of ways similar, as far as some of the legal rules of evidence on hearsay and different things like that. It's a lot of incorporation. The same thing with the UCC code and things like that. I mean,
well, we've got to remember, though, they needed the UCC code to turn things that weren't money into money because we lost our national monetary system. The UCC is, by and large, completely unconstitutional because it takes things other than gold and silver and makes them money.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay? Once again, we lost our national monetary system back in the 30s, and since then, there has been no law. If you can't pay your debts at law, there is no law. It's that simple. And since you can't pay your debts at law in this country anymore, you can only discharge them by the use of a fiat currency, which in 1974 Congress declared had no assured value. And you wonder why the Arabs stopped selling us oil when we went off the gold standard, and all we would pay them for oil with was
money.
Crappy fiat currency. Okay? Have you ever been told why the oil embargo of the 70s occurred? Of course not.
No.
It's because we would no longer pay for oil with real money. We would only give them paper. Nixon closed the gold window.
Oh,
wow.
Okay, so the fact that, the UCC and the rules of evidence, what the Founding Fathers wanted was individual sovereign states. The whole idea was that if one state became oppressive or if one state, decided to take too much tax, too much license, whatever, the people would move to a freer, more amenable state.
yeah.
They're not all supposed to be the same. That's not the idea. Look what happened in California over the last 10 years when they got so out of whack on taxes and everything else. People started moving to Washington State. Well, that's the whole idea, but the problem is the states are too similar. Well, there are no more states. The federal states that exist today are simply puppets of the general and now federalized government. And until people, once again, learn about the law, really what's going on and how we got here and how they have made the legislative democracy real with their signature by signing into it, not knowing the purpose of government, not knowing what was the truth about what you had and had not to do related to working and paying taxes and what your citizenship means and how you derive your rights from your domicile. Most people don't even know what a domicile is. How do you
That's
get
true.
And yet it's the most important thing there is with respect to determining what your rights are and what your political affiliations are.
Now, Ed, I've got to ask you. I got to ask you this: how in the heck did you get into all this?
Well, I had a company that I ran for a number of years, and I got tired of the suits, the dingbats declaring that, because we were really good to our associates, they weren't employees, that somehow, we should be punished by more taxes. I mean, I got audited 3 years in a row, and they never found an extra penny of tax that we owed. And so I actually just threw the keys to the company one day to my partner. I said, I'm out of here. I've had enough. Have a ball.
Huh.
And I started looking around to find out what was going on. Was I wrong? Were my impressions of what the world's supposed to be was wrong? And then I found there was a whole group of people out there who had the same concerns and started reading. And then I went down some wrong roads. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And you couldn't trust everything that people wanted to sell or, tell you. And then fortunately, I got up with these guys. T.J. Henderson is one of the other co-authors, and Dick Kegley, who's the other co-author of the book. And we got together out in Oregon, and everybody had a little piece of it, said, we need to let people know what the truth is. And we have issued a challenge to any pointy-head academician that if you can find anything in the book that's, incorrect, that case law doesn't support, we'll change it. We'll, tip our hat to you. One of the things we point out is we ask people, what is the source of authority for the income tax? Now, the IRS lies to you and says it's the 16th Amendment, but there's case after case saying the 16th Amendment gave the Congress no new taxing power. Well, the short answer is that they absolutely don't want you to know the taxing authority for the income tax comes out of the Social Security Act.
Yeah.
Specifically Title 8, Section 801. And it says right in there, in addition to other taxes, there should be levied, collected, and paid upon the income of every individual a tax equal to the following percentages of wages.
Neil Bortz actually talks about that in his book, The Fair Tax book.
Well, the fair tax is completely unconstitutional, and anybody that wants to go for it needs to have their head examined.
I was just talking about the history involved with the Social Security.
Yeah, well, people have to understand that there's only two types of taxes provided in the Constitution, direct and indirect, and they have very specific legal meanings and definitions, and you can't just go make them up as you go. A national sales tax is neither a direct nor an indirect tax.
Huh.
Okay, well, let's put it this way. If it's a direct tax, then it has to be apportioned. Oops, real hard to do with a sales tax. If it's an indirect tax, then it has to be optional. Okay, an indirect tax, like an excise, has to be avoidable. Oops, can't do that with a national sales tax that's on everything there is. You know, that's why excise taxes are constitutional. If you don't want to pay the excise tax on tires, don't buy tires. If you don't want to pay it on booze, then don't buy the booze. So, again, you know, how many Americans do you think have actually sat down and read the Constitution within the last 24 months? Well, I
have.
count them on my hands. Okay, most Americans have been primed to believe that the Constitution is obsolete. You know, I've had government agents tell me, "Oh, that was 100 years ago. That doesn't apply today. We've evolved since then." Well, if you read the founding fathers, specifically Jefferson, he's my bud, man. He's my main man. He predicted everything that's going on today. I mean, it was uncanny the way these guys knew human nature. They'd studied history and knew that whether it was the Roman Empire or the Ottoman Empire or anything that's happened before or since, everything that's happening today had already happened before.
Let me give a quick plug for your book. The book is U.S. of A versus U.S., The Loss of Legal Memory of the American State. Now, can we get this book on Amazon?
No, Amazon, we can't. I've tried all the major sellers. No one will touch this with a 10-foot pole. So the best way is go to our website, usofavus.com. US of A, OF is the of, avus.com. You can order it there. You can also call the publishing company, which is at 828-398-4358.
Now, are you still including the 10-hour MP3 with that book?
Yes, there's an MP3 and a year's membership to the website. We have to put everything behind, a sign-in ID and everything, because basically we're participating in protected free speech, and if it's out for the world to see, then it can be considered legal speech, and then we have a problem. And so we do hide it behind a login so we can talk about what we want and be free of the government.
Okay.
I think that was the government chiming in just now.
Yeah, we just heard a weird beep on our...
Yeah, it was the Poindexters up in Washington.
Tape changing.
Yeah, they're changing tape. They do that a lot on our show.
I bet you're definitely an interesting character of interest to the U.S. government at this point in time, Ed.
Oh, I can guarantee you we all are. I'm sure I've got a red file with the FBI and everything else. But once again, I simply ask the question, they took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Did they mean it or not?
Good question.
If they didn't mean it, then they're committing sedition and treason against, my country. And if they did mean it, then they are out there. They should be protecting me. The purpose of a government is to protect rights, and those are all the rights, even the ones that are inconvenient for them.
I agree. Well, Ed, I'm going to stop you there. We're going to take a short break. We're going to be back in just a little bit. We're going to open up our lines here. If you want to speak with Ed Wahler, give us a call here at 877-722-7382. That number again is 877-722-7382, or locally 336-996-1596. You're listening to World of the Unexplained on Planet Paranormal.
Every Halloween at midnight, the devil simultaneously appears in two places: the high plains of India and a quiet cemetery in Kansas. It's November 2nd, the Day of the Dead, Two federal marshals report to the small town of Shinbone, Kansas, moments after a tornado warning, to transport a prisoner with no past, no identity. He is known only as Sin Jin Smith. Starring Roddy Piper, Richard Tyson, Jonathan Davis, Kevin Gage, Gary Casper, John Philbin, Billy Duffy, Charles Cypers, and Eileen Dietz. Check out the movie that critics are calling one of 2007's most anticipated horror films by visiting www.sinjinsmith.com. That's www.sin-jinsmyth.com. St. Jin Smith is a Snapkick Productions film, written and directed by Ethan Detmeyer. Coming soon to a theater near you.
And we're back to World Explained. Ed Wahler. Ed, you still there?
I'm here.
Okay. Just a follow-up question to my earlier one about the states and their existence. What do you make of places, I guess they're called protectorates, but I'm not really sure if that's the term. Places like Puerto Rico, American Samoa, places not in the United States, but still under some kind of jurisdiction. What's their relationship to the government?
Well, those are insular possessions or federal territories.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, they are under the exclusive control of Congress at Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 17 and 18, and Article 4, Section 2, I believe, where Congress shall make all needful rules respecting the territory of the United States. And see, this is what people don't realize, is that Congress wears two hats. Okay, Congress can regulate for the states, the several states of the Union, concerning 17 limited enumerated powers that the states gave to Congress when the states created the Constitution. Okay, the rest of the time, Congress is legislating for the territories. Believe it or not, if you look at the federal case law, the age discrimination laws are territorial. The EPA is territorial. You know, all these things that people just take for granted that the feds can come in and do in the states, they can't. The problem is that lawyers, being the scumbags that they are, won't go fight for people's rights. I mean, the lady up in New London, the Kelo case, nobody told her that it was because she registered her property with the Register of Deeds and put it into the public trust that she gave the government 100% complete control of it. If her lawyer had told her, like he should have, well, you know, if you want to get control of your property back, just pull it out of the land registration system known as the Torrens Act. You volunteered to put it in there. You waived your ownership. You accepted a benefit in that the state supposedly guarantees your warranty deed and will defend your title unless it's against taxes or something where they have an interest. You know, people have become legal idiots by design. They took teaching of law out of the schools after the Civil War because the bar wanted all of us to be legal idiots and dependent upon lawyers. Okay, in the late 1700s in this country, what percentage of households do you think had law books in them? Take a guess.
Oh, I don't know.
Probably a good percentage.
I'd say 50.
96% or
Wow.
better. And that doesn't include the Bible, the ultimate law book. Okay, if you ask today, it's whatever percentage of attorneys are in this country is probably what percentage of people have law books in their home today.
You got to understand too, though. Back then, you know, you go to law school for 6 weeks if you wanted to be a lawyer, and you know, you're done. It's one book. It's, you know, you're looking at people, you know, judgments by I guess Sir Edward Coke and people like that. That you know, you would just pick it up, and you know, it was in one. I wouldn't say easy to read, but there wasn't as much of it. There wasn't as much legislation. I mean, it was a lot smaller. It was more compact.
Well, what do you think is the cause, and what do you think is the effect? Do you think we have all this law today because we're legally ignorant, or we're legally ignorant because we have all this law? The bottom line is when people stopped understanding what the purpose of government was, when they stopped being able to take care of their own legal affairs, then we got very litigious. Hey, wait a minute, you know,
I agree.
I don't know how to read a contract. I don't know how to deal with a person, you know, who has fixed my lawnmower or my car. I got to go sue them because, gee, I don't understand the relationships between parties to a contract.
Oh no, I mean it's exactly right. And there other things are just legal words like consideration, for example, in a contract. If you're a layperson and I say, well, that contract's going to fail because it has no consideration, you're going to look at me like I'm nuts.
Well, but back then, businessmen, even little shop owners, the smallest business owner in the smallest town, in the smallest city or colony or whatever you want to call them back in the late 1700s, knew what a bill of exchange was, knew what a promissory note was, knew how to generate them, knew how to handle them. I mean, there's a book that I've got from 1868 called Every Man's a Lawyer, and it was a top-selling book and told you how to do bankruptcy, how to do wills, how to write contracts, how to do bills of exchange, how to do promissory notes. I mean, everyone knew back then that, hey, you're responsible for your own life. They knew that no one was going to pay for your health care and all your other stuff. You had to be responsible for every facet of your life.
Where do you think we're going? Do you think we're going to a socialistic state at this point?
A welfare state.
Going?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Paying attention?
I think we're going towards socialism, which I also equate somewhat with communism. But I mean that's what I'm asking though. I mean, where do you think?
All 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto are in place in this country. All 10. They're not missing a one. Graduated income tax, control of the means of production. I mean, you go through down all 10 and read them. They're all here. Because we are a legislative democracy now, and of course a democracy is just another name for socialism.
Except, of course, Karl Marx said that the state would wither away whenever a true communist government existed, and that's
and you don't think we're withering away? We're the world's largest debtor nation. We have a declining standard of living. Our greatest export is now agricultural. The people don't understand what money is. Our fiat currency, known as the Federal Reserve Note, which is neither federal nor reserve, is worth 3% of what it was worth in 1929. How much more withering do you want to have happen?
You left out that the service industry is now the leading industry in this country, so we're all going to be fixing salads for each other eventually.
Well, wealth comes out of the ground. It's the conversion of natural resources into something of value.
Right.
You cannot build wealth in a service economy. The leaders of this nation, in terms of the corporate interest, have gutted any semblance of a industrial capacity. What more can you say?
Now, what's your future view on this? What do you think? I mean, do you think that it's something that I'm assuming that since you wrote this book, and since you're giving these seminars, or since you gave these seminars in the past, I'm assuming that you hope, and your hope is to bring everyone together to turn this around. But realistically, what do you see happening in the next 15 to 20 years?
Well, I can't go out that far. I can tell you within the next 2 to 3 years, there will be a massive economic collapse. The Federal Reserve Note will find a collapse. And by the way, this isn't a prediction of mine. If you've been reading the international press for the last 5 years, the failure of the dollar has been talked about as a fait accompli. Everyone knows about it except the ignorant American people who rely on the same media that's controlled by less than 5 total interests, that they're been lied to, they've been propagandized, they have no clue what's going on. Then after the collapse, who knows? I don't like the prescription because in the history of this country, every major financial collapse has been anteceded by a war.
Yeah.
And I think war with China and Russia over Iran are very realistic because we have mutual defense pacts with both those countries. Or excuse me, Iran has mutual defense pacts with Russia and China. So, and that's how World War I and World War II got started. They don't write a new playbook. They just keep coming back to the same one over and over again because they let enough time go by that we don't learn our lessons from history. So it's going to be very ugly. If anybody has actually read the history of the Depression era, it was horrendous.
I've read some interviews by Studs Terkel, some years ago.
Seabiscuit showed people the fact that people gave away their children because they couldn't feed them, and then The next person down the line ran into financial trouble, and the children were handed off. But what they don't realize was, at least in 1929, which was an engineered crash by the Federal Reserve interest back then, and they've admitted that that was the truth, at least we had a dollar which was backed by gold, and our currency was real.
So why don't we
People
go...
don't
I'm sorry, that was one of my questions. Why don't we go back to the gold standard? It makes so much more sense to have value to the money that we use. I mean,
Well,
why
because
not?
if we went back to the gold standard, then the bankers could manipulate the money supply and make huge profits. That's why we have. I mean, Rothschild said, let me control the money, and I care not who makes the laws. And so people don't understand in this country that we don't have money. People don't understand that inflation is an unseen tax. It will destroy your savings. That it impairs the obligation of contracts in contradistinction to the requirements of the Constitution. The American people are asleep at the wheel. Jefferson said, if you expect ignorance and freedom in the society, you're expecting that which never was and that which will never be. So we're ignorant in this country. We've let our supposed leaders scam us into trade agreements that destroy our infrastructure, that wipe out wealth, that make people, have to go get jobs at Walmart. And I don't think I can't stop it. I don't think there's enough people even willing to put the effort into it. They've all given up, saying you can't fight City Hall, not my problem, don't want to hear about it, pass the buck to somebody else. I mean, even George Carlin in one of his recent concerts went through the issue of who owns the country. I mean, he was brutal in his delivery, as he usually is, with foul language, but folks, the people that own this country want you fat, stupid, and lazy so they can manipulate and control you.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, the sicker you get, the more money they make. The largest industry in this country now is healthcare. Healthcare produces nothing.
No, that's a perfect segue, because I understand that you're involved in some kind of alternative health things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't worry about the chemtrails. The cure for AIDS has been in the Patent and Trademark Office since 1991. Cancer is not a problem unless you go to a doctor and get cut, burned, and poisoned. It's all out there, but people are so trained to go to somebody they trust, their healthcare professional. And the funny thing is, it's not the doctor's fault. They went to medical school, they paid a whole lot of money, but they weren't taught what's available. They were taught a particular version of healthcare that makes the pharmaceutical companies really, really rich.
Now, what kind of health, alternative health and medicine are you into, Ed?
What we call radiobiology, which is energy medicine, and oxygen therapies. I take a certain amount of supplementation, drink about 2 gallons of water a day, but it has to be living water. It can't be the filth that comes out of your faucets with chlorine, which is a neurotoxin in it, with fluoride, fluoride was used by Hitler to control the people in the camps. Hitler makes you stupid.
So
what you got to do is go out on the web and Google fluoride in the water, and there are accomplished scientists who have written defensible pieces that show that fluoride is a neurotoxin that will drop your IQ by at least 20 to 30 points.
No, what do you mean when you say living water? Is this something like just distilled water we can buy in a store? Is this where do we get this?
Well, if you have a good well that's not poisoned and can put a vortex in your water and a few other things, you can definitely be drinking living water. It's a whole other topic of discussion that could fill a whole show.
But that's true.
There are forms. Basically, it has to deal with the bond angle of the hydrogen atoms to the oxygen.
Okay.
And Victor Schauberger, also known as the Water Wizard, showed, and I've proven this in my pool, that if I keep the water in my pool living, I absolutely need no chlorine or anything to keep algae from growing. And as soon as I let the water die, algae plumes come up.
Wow.
Yep,
That's amazing.
Absolutely proven. So there's so much out there that's just so cool and can enrich our lives so much. I mean, free energy, Tesla just proved it back, his 1901 patent.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there were 1920s, he drove a Pierce Arrow automobile around a racetrack in Buffalo for 7 straight days, never stopped except to change drivers with no fuel.
I did not know that.
No, I didn't know that.
I just read about his...
It was in the papers. It was in the Buffalo papers back then.
I read about his experiments saying that you could basically... He had wanted to basically be able to push something into the ground and be able to
draw power
from that, yeah.
Actually, there are patents on that, too, that the U.S. patent...
Well, I'm an electrical engineer, and I had to unlearn 90% of what I paid dearly to go to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and learn.
Wow.
Because it was in the way of me understanding and becoming proficient in what the real world's about.
This is interesting stuff.
I won't go into what my energy research involves, because it's, you can be killed for this stuff if you commercialize it in the wrong way. And I mean, the oil interest, you think they protect medicine, they protect their oil cartel harder and more severely than anything else.
Yeah, certainly so. I know this is also kind of a segue, but it's kind of interesting. Alternative power sources interest me anyway, but what about things like solar and wind power? Are they up to snuff, or are they just another manipulation?
They're a joke. The biggest joke on mankind today is hydrogen power.
Oh, yeah?
Really?
Hydrogen is not an alternative energy source. It is an alternative energy storage medium. Okay? Hydrogen does not exist by itself in nature. So you have to crack water, crack hydrocarbons, whatever, to create it.
That makes sense.
All you're doing is changing one form of energy, known as coal, nuclear, or whatever, into another form of energy known as hydrogen. It's not an energy source. Okay, but the reason the oil companies are going for it is they know to make hydrogen, you're going to have to use fossil fuels to create the electrical energy to crack the hydrogen off of the water molecule, or to take hydrocarbons, which are actually, of course, the initial petroleum fuels, and crack them into hydrogen. Hydrocarbons have a lot of hydrogen in them. What a surprise.
Yeah.
Okay,
Shocking.
so that's a huge scam to say Clint Bush is out there, we're going to be driving hydrogen cars and they're non-polluting. The car may be non-polluting, but how did you make the hydrogen?
Right.
You idiot. Okay, alternative energy sources, the kinds that me and others are looking at, are truly that. The source is, of course, the atmosphere. Do you really think God put us on this planet and said, I'm going to give you the ability to invent rockets and computers and microscopes and everything else, but I'm not going to give you any way to power it? No, he gave us a way, but these people called the robber baron said, look, we can't make any money if people can get free energy everywhere. So what did they do? They created a system whereby energy is the throttle on people's innovation and ability to live a better life. And we know how to do something about it, but if you do it, especially in this country, you'll be taken out in a heartbeat.
So, I know this is, if you can be as brief as possible and as dumbed down as possible, what then would be this free energy? What's the source?
Well, in the case of Edwin Gray's patents and some of the others, cold electricity is a wonderful source. You can make cold electricity from regular electricity, and you get about 1,000x gain on the energy. Okay, Edwin Gray demonstrated it. Others have dollared over in Australia, and Tesla pretty much had it perfected before he died. Of course, all his papers were taken by the government and confiscated.
Right.
So you got coal electricity. That's one of my favorite ones. I have done a lot of work with water. I can derive more energy out of water than I put in using John Worrell Keeley's technology from the late 1800s.
We've got a caller.
Got a caller. Hold on.
Caller, you're on World of the Unexplained. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Scott from Omaha.
Hey, Scott. How's it going?
Hey, not bad. Good show, guys.
Thanks.
Hey, one question I have for your guest, kind of in line with what he was talking about, fluoride in the water, or just his general comments on our food supply. It seems like these days the food, particularly if you go to any typical neighborhood grocery store, it's just a bunch of crap on the shelves, really nothing of any nutritional value.
That's correct. That's because, got to remember, back in World War II, those people we love to hate, known as the industrialists, the Industrial Revolution created a whole lot of industrial waste. And they decided, we need to get rid of this stuff. It'd be better to just feed it to the people than to find, good ways of getting rid of it. That's how we got fluoride in the water. It's the waste product of aluminum manufacturing that got us stannous fluoride. Commercial fertilizers are just another way of getting rid of nitrogen and other waste. So what has happened for the last 70 years now is we have grown our products in the soil and didn't return the nutrients. If you will take cow manure, who eats the grass, and put it on your fields, you will get all the micronutrients, you'll get all the base elements, including your metals and everything, back into the soil, and you have a round robin, a complete loop of food to the plate, back to the ground. But no, we don't do that anymore. We deplete the soil with chemical fertilizers. So now the movement, of course, is to organic foods, which I'm a big fan of. And, of course, I'm suspect of all this spinach and leaf lettuce scares because, oh, wait a minute, it came from cow manure that polluted the water supply. Well, be careful, folks. They're coming after your organic foods as being unsafe.
Yeah,
and of course,
not to seem too conspiratorial, but it also seems kind of crazy that all the junk in the stores makes people sick, and then guess what? They got drugs to sell you to make you better.
Yeah.
It just seems like a big crazy loop.
Americans do not know how to eat anymore. If it doesn't come out of a box or a bag, they don't know what to do. I mean, I can tell you, in my home, we cook. We eat well. But our food comes out of, the ground. It's real food, and we cook it, and we prepare it, and we enjoy it. And until Americans learn how to eat, they're going to be obese, they're going to be sick, they're going to have, all kinds of the problems that they're already having. What a surprise. We've forsaken the lessons of God. I was reading the Bible, and I don't know where you guys are on the Bible. I am.
We're Trent and I are both Christians. Chuck's I don't know what Chuck is. He's agnostic.
Okay, well, that's fine. He has that right to be that. But, I mean, in the Bible it says, do not be a surety for another's debt. Well, everyone out there with a Social Security card is a surety for the debt of the United States because your Social Security card is bonded for about $1 million. You can actually you can do a FOIA request. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's a Freedom of Information Act request, and get the serial numbers of the Federal Reserve notes that your Social Security number is bonding.
Good God.
Now, how's that for a cool thing? Okay? Your government has sold you into slavery. There's a document from 1933, Senate document, 43, where it says all property resides in the state and the people are mere users. Does that begin to explain to you why you don't have any property rights? Because you don't. Your government has said all property resides in the state.
Huh. Well, guys, we're gonna have to take a break. Scott, thanks for calling. Scott,
hey,
are you there?
For the show.
Okay.
No.
We're making sure you're there. Scott, thanks for calling, and we'll be back here on World of the Unexplained in just a moment. And we're back on World of the Unexplained. Tonight we're here with author Ed Wahler.
And we have a caller.
U.S. of A versus U.S. We do have a caller.
Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Laura. I'm calling from Kansas.
Hey, Laura.
Hey.
What's up?
This is definitely an interesting topic for sure. Well, lots of things. definitely one of the things I would like to mention is high fructose corn syrup.
Okay.
Yeah. It's in everything.
We just got Mexico forced into accepting our high fructose corn syrup by treaty. Isn't that a wonderful thing for Mexico?
For God's sakes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the thing of it is,
Department
it's like these other countries are introducing it and having, you know, diabetes and obesity issues, and why can't we stop it here in our own country? What's going on with that?
Who's going to stop it? Most Americans think it's absolutely fine. The number of people who know that it's a poison, and of course it's been known by the producers that it was a poison since the 1930s or 40s. Okay, look how long NutraSweet stayed on the market. Okay, even though the original approval tests were shown years and years ago that mice were dying by ingesting NutraSweet.
Yeah.
Okay, look, the American people are getting the government they deserve.
You know,
That's
it scares me
line.
though, because most people don't even know what it does to you, and it's in everything.
Well, when you can't turn off the TV and get your butt off the couch and become engaged in life, then this is what happens.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, you don't know, and don't read the newspapers because, believe me, they're not going to tell you anything that's worthwhile.
No.
So you got to go find some source of information, and I like to read the old, anything old. It's amazing what people knew. It's absolutely mind-boggling to find out how backward the people were 50, 80, 100, 150 years ago. They absolutely knew things, and like I say, reading Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, he predicted in his writings and letters everything that's going on today. The judiciary not doing its role by protecting the rights of the people, you know, the usurpations of authority that are happening from our government. I mean, it's uncanny how intelligent these people were and how absolutely dumbed down we've allowed ourselves to become.
So what do we do about it? For the people that really want to do something.
I think you need to, well, first of all, you need to get out of debt. You absolutely have to be out of debt because you're not going to be able to weather what's coming if you're in debt. Okay, during down times, the rich get richer and the middle class and the poor people get wiped out. So find a way, hook or crook, even if you got to downsize your life or whatever, get out of debt. That's number one. Number two, learn how to take care of yourself, both medically, how to grow food. For years now, I've killed a cow every 18 months. I skin it myself, I quarter it myself, and I've offered to work at the butcher so he'll teach me how to butcher my own meat. You know, get your kids out of the public schools so they can begin to get some real education instead of the drivel that the public school teachers are made to teach our children. You know, get gold and silver. Get out of Federal Reserve notes. If you got any dollar-denominated investments, get them out. Get them into gold and silver. The run-up in the stock market that's happening right now is 100% contrived and manipulated. It's for the election. Wait until after the election to see how bad it gets. You know, other than that, then from there you got to decide what you want to do. Would you want to even stay in this country? There's a lot of expatriates getting out, especially ex-military, who've seen the writing on the wall and know what's coming.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can't tell you beyond that because you got to make your own decision. You've got to become aware of what's going on. Fortunately, you know, I look at the Bible and see that all the prophecies in the Bible are coming true, especially the worst ones. So it's a great source of knowledge that people, once again, have seemed to have forsaken for some reason. Oh, yeah, it's because you're not allowed to believe in God.
Exactly.
Well, you know, it seems to me that most people don't do anything until something happens to them. You know, it's that knee-jerk reaction. They don't take the time to research it before it happens to them. And then when it does, it's too late.
What the pastor said regarding the Nazis in Germany, in that first they came for the Baptists, and I wasn't Baptist, so I didn't care. Then they came for the Methodists, and I wasn't Methodist, and so I didn't care. Then they came for the Catholics, and I wasn't Catholic, so I didn't care. Then they came for the Jews, and then it was too late.
No. Yeah.
In other words, mankind hasn't changed in the last 70, 80 years. He hasn't changed really in the last 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. It takes effort, it takes knowledge, it takes energy to learn to become a good citizen, because a good citizen practices vigilance over his servant government.
Right.
You got anything
People
else?
just rather not.
Yeah, it's tough being an activist, and as much as activists have been, ridiculed and so forth, it makes it even harder these days.
We are despised by the government.
Yep.
If you're
Well, I
not
appreciate
ignorant, they don't
you
like
doing
you.
what you do, and for those of us that are, still learning, it's great to have people out there like you.
Well, the other thing I strongly suggest is get away from 501c3 churches, because they're instruments of the government.
501c3 churches?
501c3. Those are the non-profit churches that have a designation with the IRS.
Oh, well,
Bush
I don't do religion anymore, so.
I don't do religion either. I'm Christian, but I don't do religion. And Bush just signed an executive order making all churches instrumentalities of the federal government. So
wonderful.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Okay.
Well,
thanks so much, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow.
Huh.
So
you talking to, 501, I'm sorry, Scott,
yeah,
C3.
the nonprofit.
Like the United Way and the YMCA, is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about
I'm really talking about the churches. Okay, there's no reason for a church to be registered with the IRS. They are outside the tax law by constitutional protection.
Right, separation of church
So a
and
church
state.
then goes and gets a 501c3 because they think that they have to have that for their members to be able to deduct their tithing, which is completely untrue.
Right.
Okay, and then once you get the 501c3, you find that the government can now tell the pastor what he can talk about. More than 15,000 letters went out a couple weeks ago to all the churches in the country that are 501c3 from the IRS saying, now it's an election cycle, be careful what you talk about, otherwise you'll lose your status. Okay, they're government-controlled churches by the fact that the government can control what the church clergy can talk about.
Well, how about just revoking their tax-exempt status altogether?
How about what?
My producer asked, how about just revoking their tax status?
Exempt status just altogether.
Their tax-exempt status altogether.
To do. That's what they should have done a long time ago. But I've talked to pastors at churches and, the deacons and everybody, and they go, oh, no, we can't do that. Why? Well, I don't know, because our accountant, our CPA, our attorney says, we have to do this. Oh, no, there's some guys you should be listening to.
Yeah. They have true wisdom.
Now, what do you think? You're a Christian, Ed. What do you think about what's coming? Do you think we're living in the last days?
Absolutely. And there's two pieces of evidence I'd show you. The Bible says in the end times there should be mass delusion. Well, we're there in spades. Number two, it says, my people shall be destroyed for lack of knowledge. Do you know how many people are dying from cancer, diabetes, medical ailments? We have the largest number of incarcerated people in the world, and it's all because they don't know where they live, what they're doing, what they're part of, what's going on. So we're there. All the worst. In the movie Armageddon, Billy Bob Thornton, or whatever his name, says, all the worst parts of the Bible. Well, we're there. It's happening, but people don't want to see it. Depleted uranium has been detected on the east coast of the United States. It's made a complete circle around the whole globe, landing in California, moving across the country. You know how long that stuff hangs around? Thousands of years.
Strontium-90, that's what you're talking about?
Strontium-90? Is that what you're referring to?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Okay, our water, our air is polluted, and I'm not an environmentalist. What I am is, a concerned citizen who says we don't need to be doing this to ourselves.
Yeah.
Well,
there's alternatives.
Wow.
I'm a little stumped. So, okay, and on the environmental angle, things like the EPA, I mean, they're just basically a paper tiger, that sits there and another...
Well, no, if you don't know what you're doing, they'll destroy your life, take your property, whatever.
Yeah.
But the issue is that who is the worst steward of the land in this country? That would be the federal government. Private land ownership is the best way of taking care of land. But we don't do that anymore. We think the government should have control of all the land because, they'll protect it. They're the worst stewards of the land in the country. It's been proven time and time again.
Yeah. That brings
But
to mind...
once again, people believe the propaganda. They don't look at the facts. Critical thinking was taken out of schools so that people wouldn't think critically about the lies they were being told.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say to someone who wants to break out of this monotony?
Well, I strongly suggest people get together. Don't go it alone. Get into a study group. Start, just read the Constitution. Read the document that everyone thinks controls everything in this country, and you'll see that what the Constitution says is not what's enforced in this country. I mean, you'll start scratching your head and going, well, wait a minute, how could that be? The Constitution says one thing, and the reality is another. Okay? I mean, get high-speed Internet access and start looking at health issues, nutrition. There's some very good people out there that are trying to get information out to people.
Well, that's true.
Now, as far as your health stuff, I hate to get off topic and keep going back to your health stuff, but do you have any you have any suggestions for websites or books or anything like that?
One very good book is Dr. Ed McCabe's what's the name of the book? About oxygen. Well, you can go to Oxygen America. What is it? Flood Your Body with Oxygen. Thank you. My cohort here just answered.
Okay.
Flood Your Body with Oxygen by Dr. Ed McCabe. Another book that everyone needs to read is called Type 2 Hypothyroidism by Dr. Mark Starr out of Atlanta. There is an absolute epidemic of Type 2 hypothyroidism, and there is an absolute effort by the AMA to make sure people don't get help with it because they make a lot of money treating the symptoms.
So you're saying there's cures for cancer. I'm assuming there's also cure for cirrhosis of the liver, AIDS, any kind of Crohn's disease, for example. All these things.
Every one of them.
Huh. And they're all natural.
If people will go to, I think it's nctechnology.com. There's a gentleman in the mountains of North Carolina who has over a 90% fatal cancer cure rate. He's already published in a paper the cure for breast cancer and got attacked for it. If people want to email me privately at ewaller@usofavus.com, I can share some links and some other information with them. But cancer, AIDS, diabetes, there's a systemic cause for that malady. And and that's one thing, of course, with modern medicine that they never, I have cancer. Well, why did you get the cancer? Oh, people just get it. No, they don't. There's a systemic cause for it, and if you find out what it is, the cancer will probably go away by itself. But one thing's for sure, cutting, burning, and poisoning, destroying the immune system is not going to help you recover. Yeah. They may kill it for 5 years, and then it's going to come back with a vengeance, and then it's going to get you.
Oh, I smoke cigarettes, so I know that if I get cancer, I know where it's probably coming from.
Well, see, that's one of those things where intellectually I have a problem with that. Because I know you have an addiction, but intellectually, if you smoke, then you're not using your brain to control your health.
Well, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so intellectually...
We know all the chemicals they put in on top of just the regular tobacco. We know the tons of chemicals that go into processing these things.
Yeah, well, I mean, my parents I couldn't blame for smoking because they were lied to for years.
Yeah.
Now we know the truth. So if you continue to do it, you're defying logic and reason.
But if one were to, let's say grow their own tobacco and grow it naturally, would it be nearly as harmful to their
It's
health?
still a carcinogen.
Not nearly as harmful, but what the issue is, everything in moderation. If you smoked 2 to 3 cigarettes a day, I would say have a ball. That's moderation. Anything in moderation is fine, but what do we do in America? We smoke 2 or 3 packs a day.
Yeah.
We drink a 12-pack instead of 2 beers.
To be 170, and he smoked every day of his life. See, he probably smoked 4 cigarettes a day, one in the morning, one after lunch, one after dinner,
Right.
before he went to bed.
That's true.
Okay, you got to compare apples to apples.
Yeah.
It's true.
No.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I did have a question. With all these alternative health issues and alternative energy sources, you got to think about the technicians, and we'll just say doctors, and we'll just say scientists. You know, they've spent so many years learning a set way of how things are and what you need to do to take care of problems, whatever they are. It seems to me that they would be the keystone to sort of correct the lies that we've been fed all these years. I mean, how would you basically get to them to say, look, you know, you everything you know is wrong, as Bonner says, and get them to steer. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I'll draw you an analogy that covers doctors and, say, FBI agents.
Okay.
And you can think, how am I going to link those two together, right?
Okay.
I went to a doctor who happens to be a OB/GYN oncologist. Okay, so he deals with female cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, you've got a patient, because I happen to know who she was. And I said, she's dying. You've given up on her. You've sent her home to die. Let's cure her. Free of charge. Just watch what happens. You know, you can talk about it and write about it later.
Yeah.
I said, the problem is once you see what happens, then you're not going to be able to deny it, and the AMA is going to come after you. So he would have no part of it. Okay, I go to FBI agents and I say, look, here's the limits of your federal jurisdiction. There's
they're not going to like that.
From the 1970s that says, you know, the U.S. Attorney General's office said, here's the limit of our jurisdiction. It's extremely limited. We can't go into the states, okay, unless it's on federally ceded property. And I tell an FBI agent that, and he says, I don't care. The American people have accepted our jurisdiction. Well, didn't you take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution? Well, not if it gets in the way of my authority and kicking in doors and being a man. Okay? Believe it or not, the paycheck, the power, the gun, the prestige, the investment in educate, whatever excuse you want to use, they'll use one to maintain the status quo. A body in motion stays in motion. A body at rest stays at rest.
Right.
All right? So what would I do with doctors? I don't know what to do with doctors, because those, and there are some very good doctors out there who have done their own research and said, wait a minute, there's other ways to do this.
Yeah.
They are invariably attacked with veracity by the AMA and the system. You know, they can't go out there, and when you get into the whole type 2 hyperthyroidism situation, you'll find that the AMA says the standard of care is this, and if you deviate from it, we will prosecute you. So I don't know how to fix a broke system that isn't in existence for the right reasons. Okay? There are people who have, you know, practitioners who've tried it, and like I say, they get hounded terribly.
Yeah.
So once again, though, what I would tell somebody is, and I don't have a problem with a doctor. I may go to a doctor for his diagnostic capabilities. I won't go to him for any of his medicine.
Treatment. Yeah.
Okay, but once again, can you go and get your car repaired if you know absolutely nothing about cars? Can you go to a lawyer and get good legal advice if you know absolutely nothing about the law? Can you go to a builder and get a house built if you know absolutely nothing about how a house is built? No. Okay, we've all become so incompetent in dealing with taking care of our own lives that we, guess what, can't take care of our own lives. We put it off to somebody else, the government, whoever, and now we've got the situation we have before us where we're all victims. And we truly are victims of our own ignorance.
Wow.
So let's swing back on topic and get away from the health discussion somewhat and get back onto the I guess federalism discussion that we were talking about earlier. People that want to break away and become not affiliated with the federal government issue as far as the corporation of the United States, I guess is the best way to call it. How would they go about doing that?
The best website, in addition to ours, that I can direct people to is called sedm.org. That's Sierra, Edward, David, Mike .org. And if they want to click on the forms button up at the top, they can just go read countless dissertations written by some pretty bright legal scholars. Of course, buying our book, U.S. of A v. U.S., will give you the overall primer on what your options are. You know, how do we get into this situation? Why do you have the right not to participate in the voluntary system known as Social Security? You know, people may want to know that. From there, it's about reading, studying, and challenging authority. Don't just be a lemming when somebody says, hey, you've got to do this. Really? Show me the law. Show me your authority. There's a case called Federal Crop Insurance versus Merrill. It's a Supreme Court case where Supreme Court said it is up to the citizen to anytime he enters into a bargain or an arrangement with a government agent to determine that that agent is staying within his statutory, legal, or constitutional authority. Court didn't say it's up to the agent to do the right thing. He said it's up to the citizen to make sure that this guy's within his lawful authority. Well, if you don't know what the law says, if you don't know what the Constitution says, that all his authority is derived from, how are you possibly going to know if this guy's doing the right thing? I mean, there was a piece on one of the 2020 or one of those regarding traffic stops. When the cop says, you know, get out of the car and do this and do that, they told people, look, he doesn't have the authority to do that. Of course, 99-point-something% of Americans don't have a clue what the authority of a cop is. He says it, you do it. We've all been trained to respect authority and not question it. Well, that's how we got into this mess. You know, we're a nation of legal idiots who have no clue what the law is, the purpose of government, what the limitations of power, what an oath of office means to when someone takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. So I think people need to start figuring out what that is.
And everyone that is in any kind of governmental job takes that oath to defend the Constitution. Lawyers, police officers.
One of my favorites is everyone gets stopped for a traffic thing sooner or later, right? They get their little citation, and they can either pay it off beforehand, which most people do, or they can go to court, to traffic court, and the judge is going to go, you know, $110 fine, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, people don't realize that every single person in traffic court has a right to a trial jury. A jury by trial, even in traffic court. You know, if more people would start learning what their rights are and their right to travel, and the fact that only unless you're operating commercially do you even need a license, we'd shut these courts down in a heartbeat. We could change this overnight.
Yeah, well, that's gonna eat into tax money, though.
Exactly. Don't we think the government needs a lot less tax money? Because with all the money they're having, they're doing a lot of things to us that I don't think we have. How about chemtrails? They're flying overhead, spraying over this stuff, and you talk to people, guys go, what do you think all that spraying overhead's about? I don't know. I never even noticed it before. Are you alive? You know, pick your topic. I mean, but raise local support. One of the guys I communicate with out in Washington State said, every one of us, if we would go to our county commissioners and demand that the county commissioners send notice to George Bush that we're going to walk away from the legislative democracy, we're going to restore the republic, and we're given notice of disenfranchisement and, what's the other word I'm looking for, unincorporation. We could have our republic back overnight if all 3,000 counties across the country did it, or I'd just put up with, you know, like to have the 100 counties in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows that the state doesn't exist. Oh, state of North Carolina, that's my state, that's my home state, man. I'm proud to be Carolinian. Well, your state doesn't exist.
Well, Ed, we're going to take a short break, but hang in there. Give us a call here, guys, 877-722-7382. That's 877-SCARE-U2, or locally 336-996-1596. We'll be back with Ed Wahler right after this.
And we're back to Unexplained.
We are. Good.
Yeah, World of the...
Yeah, World of the Unexplained.
Gosh, that was awful.
We're here with Ed Wahler, author of U.S. of A. versus U.S.
We apologize for that noise. I had destroyed my chair.
The number here is 877-722-7382 or 877-SCARE-U2, locally 336-996-1596. Give us a call. You can also join us in our chat room. That's it's a new chat room for those of you listening that we don't see in here. It's karmacast.com. That's karma with a K and cast with a K.com/chat/flashchat.php, or it's a lot easier just to go to our website, worldoftheunexplained.com, and click on the flash button, or the chat button.
See, it's
all right.
It's happening.
We left off on break with Ed, where we were talking about the difference between the United States of America and the United States. And the question that Ed posed was, when was the last time you heard them announce President Bush and say, the President of the United States of America? Go ahead, Ed. I'll let you take it from there.
Well, and the answer is never. In fact, even if you Google President of the United States of America, you're going to find a rock group comes up first. Basically, people have to understand that the United States of America is the republic that our founding fathers gave us. And, of course, good old Franklin, when he came out of this definitive Treaty of Paris, some lady said, "What have you given us?" And he said, "We've given you a republic if you can keep it." I mean, he knew as a double agent for the Crown at the time that there were forces afoot which were going to try and undermine, the results of that situation. So what's in existence today, 28 U.S.C. 3002 subpart 15 says the United States means a federal corporation. There's a case called Downs v. Bidwell that we talk about in our book, and the United States Supreme Court says quite definitively that the Constitution of the United States of America was made for and is binding only in the United States of America. So in the United States itself, just the United States, you're dealing with a federal corporation under the exclusive control of Congress, where you really don't have any rights, because it is truly a legislative democracy. And let me tell you, my democracy, as we all know, is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. So people have to understand that there's a difference. We are a land of contrasts. Okay, black, white, rich, poor, cold, hot, north, south, Republican, Democrat, red state, blue state, Georgia Tech, Clemson. I mean, everything in your life that you go through day to day is measured as some semblance of a contrast. Yet the most important contrast in your life is your domicile and residency. And it's never talked about. Most people couldn't articulate one sentence on domicile and citizenship.
And they're two separate things as well, and a lot of people don't understand that.
Well, your domicile defines your rights. Okay, your rights are derived from the ground you're standing on. Most people don't understand that, of course. They don't understand that, for instance, the whole feet wet immigration policy. When a Cuban or whatever gets feet wet on United States soil, he is immediately covered by our Constitution. Okay, and that's why that policy exists. Supreme Court said, it's not your citizenship, it's your domicile, it's the ground you're standing on that defines your rights. Well, what people do by accepting benefits from, the criminal cabal up in the District of Criminals is they literally relocate themselves from one of the several states and having a domicile within the several states where they have rights to being a resident of the District of Columbia. And therefore they can't have property because they don't have any property rights. They don't have the first 10 amendments. They don't have God-given. They don't have unalietables. They don't really have anything. There's a court case called U.S. v. Valentine where the court ruled the only absolute and unqualified right of a United States citizen is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. Now, how much more plain can that be? You don't have much in the way of rights as a U.S. citizen. So what we do is we get into these entanglements because our wonderful elected officials have superior knowledge They have people behind the scenes writing laws that make us subject to all manner of deceptions, and they get into these contracts, these binding adhesion contracts like licenses and birth certificates and Social Security applications and on and on and on and on, and they have consequences. There's meaning under international contract law about the effects of signing an agreement. Okay, there's a court case way back from I'm not even going to think of the year. Anyway, back in the 1800s, where somebody sued regarding the revenue, the Internal Revenue Bureau back then. And the judge ruled that when the Metters, it was Henry Metter, took on a license to manufacture tobacco and snuff products, that all the law was before them, that it's a contract with the government. And now can they impugn that contract? Well, the court thought not, because they freely signed the contract. Well, what contracts have you gotten yourself into? And what's the meaning of them? And how have they impaired your rights? People need to know this. And of course, they don't, because they're not told. They're literally lied to and deceived by their serving government.
So the only way out at this point in time is to form these groups, take back your citizenship.
Sever legal relations with the United States, get your status right where you can go to your congressman, and I do it quite frequently now. I go to my congressman and say, I don't care about how you legislate for the District of Columbia, but here's the deal. Where I'm from, you have to legislate according to the Constitution and your oath. Now, are you going to do it? Are you going to, maintain your oath and not commit fraud upon the office? And it's very, very, I've had very good luck. I can establish who I am, and I know the extent of the law. One of the issues is dealing with the post office. There's a constitutional post office, and then there's a corporate postal service. Most people don't know there's a difference. Okay, the postal service can wrangle you into all kinds of little messy things. If you use the postal service, you're accepting a benefit, you've waived your rights, all kinds of things happen. Nobody knows. Okay, because the Postal Service serves federal territory, called federal zones, is demarked by those pesky things called zip codes. If you use a zip code, you agree that you live in a federal territory. Nice, huh?
Oh, yeah.
So
if you deal in Federal Reserve notes, you're accepting a benefit to discharge your debts instead of paying them at law. Of course, people don't understand that Federal Reserve notes aren't money. There's nothing federal. There is no reserve. So until people get aware, nothing's going to change. And like I say, I don't think it's going to change. I think they're going to suffer through a really dismal event here in the next couple of years, because no fiat currency has made it indefinitely in the history of man. Why do we think the Federal Reserve, they've already announced the Amero, which is the combined U.S., Mexican, and Canadian currency.
Oh, kind of like a NAFTA for money.
Well, it's the euro, but it's the the North American version of the euro. Why do they want that? Well, they know the Federal Reserve note is pretty well at the end of its run. There's not much life left in the old ticker for the Federal Reserve note. So they'll give us a brand new fiat currency, like they gave the European Union the euro, and then they'll have another 50, 60, 70 years to rape and pillage us.
Well, I guess we can't send jobs to Mexico anymore.
Well, I mean, all these moves are destroying the sovereignty of our nation, and the elected officials have no authority to destroy the sovereignty of our nation. If you think that you're voting for somebody who has your interests in heart, please get off the fluoride and the other mind-altering drugs, because it's not the case. You're adding to your own deception.
So do you grow your own vegetables, or do you just buy them?
We have a very large garden. I have so much food canned in the storage building that I've got years worth of canned food.
Wow. Okay.
And I kill my own beef, and and
that's impressive.
I know how to survive. I know where food comes from. I know how to get more. I know how to grow it. I know how to shoot it. And we've actually had homeschooling classes on skinning beef or skinning a deer or whatever because people don't know how to do it anymore.
I wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was a kid.
There's a couple of guys here in North Carolina that would skin a deer for sure.
I remember when I was a kid, though. My grandpa would take me outside. We had a bunch of chickens, and every time we wanted to eat a chicken, we had this stump, and we would stretch his neck across and get the axe out, and then I was a kid, so it would be my job to chase the headless chicken down the yard, and grab it and bring it back to my grandpa.
I'm lazy. I just take a 22 and drop them. I ain't gonna chase a darn chicken around. It's too easy just to shoot them. So.
But people don't do that anymore. If you want chicken now, you go to the store and buy it.
That's about right.
If you want beef, you go
get
buy
all
it.
the hormones and the chemicals, and we've gone to organic milk.
Yeah.
Because my daughter was above the 100th percentile in height. I mean, the female hormones that are being ingested through the milk are incredible. And people are wondering why, the young ladies now are getting into maturity when they're 11, 10, 9 years old.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's true.
Yeah, it is.
I think there was an article yesterday or something, and we saw that a 10-year-old in Nigeria had a baby.
Oh, my God.
People don't, without the critical thinking skills, they don't question the cause and effect of things. My whole life now is one experiment to the next, whether it be in my dental care, whether it be in my food supply, whether it be in the legal world. I want to know what happens when I try X. If I do something a little different, what happens here? What happens there? And I do the same. We homeschool our children, and they're almost to the point they hate to ask questions. Because if they ask questions, I'm going to say, well, why don't you go do this to find out? Why don't you run an experiment? Why don't you Google it and see what the answer is? And at 11 years old, my son can go into a restaurant, get good service, knows how to address his grievances if they make a mistake in his order. It's amazing if you teach your children well what they're capable of doing.
Just make sure your kids don't watch the movie Waiting. That's all I have to ask. Have you seen that, Ed?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Don't watch it if you go to restaurants a lot. Don't do it.
Oh, I know what movie you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, it's got Berg in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't care to see that one. Thank you.
Oh, man. Well, Ed, we're gonna let you go. We'll give you the last 2 minutes here. Do you have any final words?
Well, I would hope people would take the initiative to pick up the phone or get on the web and do some research. Please visit usofavus.com. We've tried to put together an educational scenario where people can begin to learn what it means to be a good, involved citizen in this country. You get the government you deserve, you get whatever you deserve, you get out of it what you put in, and if people don't start paying attention, they're going to find themselves in a very, very uncomfortable position with respect to finance, law, government, the whole shebang. So thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. There's
Absolutely.
a lot of people trying to get the word out there. There are a lot of concerned people, and we need a whole lot more. Because let me tell you, there's nothing that a government bureaucrat fears more than an informed citizen.
That's true.
That's true. And
so be blessed, y'all, and appreciate it.
Oh,
thanks
absolutely.
so much, Ed. We appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that was Ed Wahler.
It sure was. History has proven us true, Scott, that no democracy has ever, at some point, kill
the music, man. We don't need it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we'll just talk.
Well, basically,
Let's just talk right now.
No, but I like the tunes. Anyway,
we'll play the tunes later when we're almost done.
There's no democracy in history that hasn't at one point or another turned into an empire. I mean, even the Greek city-state of Athens, which was like the preeminent example of what a democracy should be, basically relied upon the economic slavery of its colonies, the Delian League and the city-states in Asia Minor and stuff like that. It was the truest democracy we have ever had in the world, I think, but it was just in the city of Athens, you know. And of course Rome, it was a consulate, senators, everything like that. And what happened to it? You know.
It burned, baby.
Well, it turned into an empire first.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
And then it burned.
Well, it still burned.
Years and years later. But I mean, it's true, you know.
What do you think, man? What do you think about all this?
Are you talking to Chuck?
No, I'm talking to you.
Oh well, I mean.
I have to move my head this way to talk into the microphone.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. There's
I'm just looking at Chuck because he's pretty.
Oh, I understand. There's definitely movements going on, and the government wants to issue control, you know, and that's really what it comes down to. And you know, Ed was right. An informed citizen is a dangerous thing. An informed person, period, is a dangerous thing. You know, and the powers that be don't care for it much. They want control over you in one way or another, and there are many ways of fostering that now. I mean, back in the day, you know, you had farmers. People knew a lot more about a lot of things, you know, I think. And then we've just been sort of doped up with those electronic drugs called TV and you know, movies and stuff like that. And what was the old phrase? Give the people bread and circuses, you know, and they will be content, you know. And that's you know, that was true. That was true 2,000 years ago, and it's true today.
I guess what I was asking
bread and
is
circuses.
What I was asking, I guess, more to the point of the
escalation.
No, hang on a second.
Okay.
Eschatological perspective. Thank you. There we go. From an eschatological perspective, God Almighty. From an eschatological perspective is what I'm asking, as far as what he was saying about, you know, the biblical aspect of being in the end times and all this, that, and the other, and he's, you know, off air talking about moving to another country, you know, at some point in time because of what's coming. I mean, what do you think about all that?
I think basically people ought to, you know, it's very important to know about those things, but I think instead of devoting so much time to end time prophecy and when it's going to happen, we should devote more time in improving our way of life. You know, the end times will come when it comes. You know, it may rain tomorrow, it may rain 2 days from now, but eventually it will rain. You see what I'm saying?
It will rain.
But and I guess that's my analogy. I mean, you know, spend that time that you would use to improve the lot of yourselves, your families, and the people around you. And that's my personal take on biblical prophecy. I think it's not a waste of time, but you can use that time better, basically. I know you probably completely disagree with me, but, you know.
Well, no,
I
mean, if it's coming, it's coming. You know, I mean, that's the bottom line.
Right.
And, and there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Exactly. So try to make the landing as smooth as possible before it crashes into a mountain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who knows?
Yeah. And that's true too. You know, who knows?
No,
I mean, people say they do, but do they really?
I don't know.
You know?
No one knows. I mean, I know that. No one knows. But,
yeah.
you know.
And so instead of wandering in your sea of doubt and confusion, you know, just sort of accept it as a reality. You know?
No, except I just find it interesting, you know, comparing some of the stuff he says to just some of the other things that are floating around out there, like John Teeter talking about the 5 different presidents after the big cataclysmic changes in the United States, and then thinking back to what I'd heard about the, you know, if the U.S. attacks Iran, then there may be, you know, all those U.S. cities that are going to have small suitcase nukes put in them because of the Arabs that are pissed off. You know, it just makes you wonder what, you know, the Islamo-fascist, you know, with all that movement and everything, and it makes you wonder what would happen to this country. And the thing would, I think, if you get a cataclysmic event that severe, that it probably would shift this country into a state of
martial law.
Yeah, martial law, where the Constitution would no longer apply.
Yeah, and
that's a scary place to be.
A dictator for life, so to speak.
Yeah, we've got, you know, a new Fidel Castro at your service.
Yeah.
Speaking of old Fidel, how is the old guy?
I'm doing well, from what I understand.
Really? That man just will not die.
Hey, you know what? Let me tell you a story
he just
about.
Won't die,
let me tell you a
he?
story about Castro. Is one of my favorite communist dictators. You know,
one of my favorite. You know, on my list of favorite communist dictators, Castro's number one.
Listen,
we'll go through his top 10 list next week.
Yeah, I don't agree with anything the man is about. I mean, maybe parts of it with education and stuff like that, but I mean, otherwise he is a dictator, plain and simple. But do you know how many attempts the CIA has instigated to?
Hundreds.
I mean, yeah, death attacks. But one.
I heard something about a cigar. I remember something about.
Yeah, there was a very interesting thing.
Something about his beard.
And I'm getting to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Basically, that the CIA had concocted this scheme that cost us, I don't know how many millions tax dollars to poison Castro with a certain kind of toxin that would make him lose his hair and therefore his very charismatic and trademark beard. They were trying to destroy Castro's beard. And you know what? I think I should write a book about that. And it's destroying.
Hell of a short
the
book.
title of Castro's beard.
Yeah, Castro's beard. I mean, it's such a fun little anecdote of the Cold War.
One of the people in our chat room says he was a hell of a ball player. Yeah, he was. Wasn't he a lawyer too? Didn't he go to law school in America?
He tried out for the New York Yankees as well.
He tried out for the New York Yankees.
Isn't that crazy? If he had been accepted to the New York Yankees, he would
never. Yeah, see, it's all New York's fault. It's the Yankees' fault. It's always the Yankees' fault. That's the problem.
I'm not
America
applying
today.
that.
It's the Yankees.
I'm not going with that. I could have gone somewhere, but I'm not going.
Always north of the Mason-Dixon line.
But seriously, I mean, that's a fun little story, destroying Castro's beard.
No. But what I'm saying, wasn't he a law? Didn't he go to law school in America? I heard this at some point.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah,
I mean, that would be funnier if he did go to law school in America because of the fact that he's a communist dictator now. So obviously he felt that the Constitution wasn't all it's cracked up to be, right?
There you go, Scott. If you don't pass the bar next time, find you a third world country, grow a beard.
Grow a beard and rule it with an iron hand.
That's right. And we'll call it the United.
Then you can flee there when the United States.
Yeah, and you got to call it like the People's Democratic Republic or some kind of misnomer. At least
it sound good.
At least they're honest about their lies. They want to call it the People's Democratic Republic when it's nothing but,
This was a strange show.
Yeah, it was. But as far as your end times thing, Scott, it's like I said, I think you can spend more time bettering your life and the lives around you.
Kick the music.
Well, I was waiting.
Next week. Oh, me. Next week we've got Pamela Heath and John Climo. I hope it's not Climo. I think it's Climo. Suicide, What Really Happens in the Afterlife, Channeled Conversations with the Dead. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
So now, I think last time I talked to her, I think we were going to do like her the first hour and him the second hour. That way we can get two different perspectives on it. I don't know. What do you think about that? Or have them both on at the same time? I don't know.
Well, we've done that before with Feather and Schmicker.
I know. We'll talk about it and decide over the course of the week if we want to have them both on at the same time or separately, and allow you guys to chime in and see what you've got to say. But anyway,
next week,
October 23rd. That's my mother's birthday, actually.
Happy birthday.
Wow, yeah, I'll have to tell her that. So next week, Pamela Heath and John Climo, Suicide, What Really Happens in the Afterlife, Channeled Conversations with the Dead, following by our Halloween special, which I'm going to announce real quick. We got about 40 seconds. We've got Ethan Dettenmeyer coming back from St. John Smith with a secret cast member. I hear it may be Jenna Jameson. That's just a possibility.
No kidding.
And so check that out. They just put up our MySpace, our poster for Black Book Romance on the MySpace thing for our song on their movie. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, guys, this is Jay Scott, your only JD DJ on the Planet Paranormal Radio Network.
This is Trent Lackey. We're coming to you from Kernersville, North Carolina, a small town where, as usual, we talk about very big things.
Huge. All right, we out.
All right, bling.